Okay, going to start now, folks.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar. It's early days, so we may wait a minute or two. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes as people continue to join. And while we wait, please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. I hope everybody's doing really well today. We've got a great discussion planned here. We've got guests from LearnUpon and from Planhat with a lot of content to get through. So great, Chicago, Colorado. Peter will be pleased to see the Colorado.
Yeah, welcome, Hannah.
Orlando, Florida. I love it. San Diego. Oh, I'm so jealous, Devon. This is great. Look at all these fabulous locations. Super, folks. Keep that coming. And we're going to kick off now in just a couple of seconds. There's just a few more people joining, and then we will get started. Okay, great. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar on scaling customer onboarding with smarter data and learning. I'm Jen Rosney. I am a manager on the strategic customer success team here at LearnUpon, and I am going to be your host for the session here. So today we're going to explore how companies can leverage data-driven insights and smarter learning strategies to optimize their onboarding process. Throughout the session, we absolutely encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. I will stop where and when it makes sense to do so. I definitely don't want to disrupt the flow of the speakers, but as questions start to kind of file in, I will try to pose some of those to our panelists, and we'll get as many of those answered as possible. So let's dive in. Firstly, I'm going to ask our two guest speakers to briefly introduce themselves before we begin. So Peter, I'm going to hand over to you first, please, to go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you, Jen. My name is Peter Robitaille. I manage the product enablement here at Planhat. Very excited to be here. If you're not familiar with Planhat, we are, that customer management platform, really helping organizations grow those lifelong customers. So our goal is to help companies acquire, service, and grow their customers. So I've spent almost a decade as a CSM, so have a lot of experience in the CS world. I live in Denver, Colorado, so love to see a couple people from Colorado joining in today with my wife and my 2-year-old. Just love spending time outside, chasing him around, and going to as many concerts as I possibly can, as maybe you can tell by the background behind me here. So very excited to be here.
Brilliant, Peter. Thank you so much. And Katya, going to hand over to you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katya Buratovich, and I manage the implementation team here at LearnUpon, which is a learning management system that'll help you develop, curate your customer training. I've had over 7 years of experience in the SaaS industry, and 6 of those specifically working in tech learning. I also run LearnUpon's Customer Academy, and this was kind of what moved us from an in-person training model into our online customer learning program at the moment. I'm South African, but currently living in Portugal, and love anything to do with the ocean.
Super. And so well you may love the ocean, Katya, in a fabulous location like that. So yeah, very jealous again. I'm in Ireland, by the way, folks, for anybody wondering. I'm based in Dublin here in Ireland. Okay, so going to start off with an icebreaker question before we pummel our lovely guests with some questions. So the icebreaker question, you might want to either mull over this as we're going through the discussion, or maybe this is very top of mind for you and topical, and you might feel, oh, I want to jump in and answer this immediately. And of course, if you want to keep the answer to yourself, that's fine too. But what we'd really love to know is if you had a magic wand and you could instantly fix one common mistake that people make during customer onboarding, what would that be? So if you could instantly fix one common mistake that people make during customer onboarding, I'm sure we all have loads of things popping into our mind, but what's top of mind? What would you fix instantly? All right, so we're going to begin by exploring how we can better understand the challenges of scaling customer onboarding. So, regardless of what role we're in right now, we're likely all aware of at least some of the common challenges that companies face as they scale their onboarding process. But typically, you'll find that as companies grow, delivering tailored onboarding experiences definitely becomes more and more of a challenge. So, some of those traditional approaches might not work anymore, it just might not be sufficient. So, Katya, I'm going to come over to you for the first question, please. In your view, what are some of the biggest challenges companies face nowadays when scaling customer onboarding?
Sure, Jen, and this is also this would be my magic wand to fix training program mistakes that are commonly made, and the biggest one is data silos. There's not enough importance placed on integrating with other systems that'll allow you to kind of streamline your management and your data insights. And what this breeds is then a lack of a comprehensive view of what your customers are going through, what they're dealing with in their life cycle. So that would be my main one. The other is then building off of that, measuring their success and building iteratively. So it's hard to scale an onboarding program if you don't have defined KPIs that you're tracking that can help you identify bottlenecks and kind of refine that process there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see poor communications come in there from Rebecca. That's definitely a huge one. And Devon, for sure, too much too soon, absolutely overloading everybody with too much too soon. Peter, what about you? What do you think some of the biggest challenges that companies face now when it comes to scaling customer onboarding are?
Yeah, Katya, I totally agree with what you're saying about the data silos. For me, really, the first thing that popped in my head was really boils down to how can you automate the onboarding journey, but keep it as personalized and customized as possible, right? As you're scaling, you're working with potentially less resources, taking on more things. So how can we create a repeatable process that can be applied to as many customers as possible, but use kind of customer data to tailor these experiences to their needs and their goals.
Sure. In such a busy world, we're all looking for automation, but it's really hard, isn't it, to combine that and then keep it very personal as well and not have it too robotic. There's some really great comments coming in there as well from people. Lack of proactive engagement as well as a lack of defined onboarding milestones. Absolutely, Colleen, that's for sure. And actually, that's something we're going to touch on a little bit further on down in the discussion. Lack of hiring manager involvement. Yes, until after the new hire has started. That's a big one, isn't it, Megan? The hiring manager could be blind to everything that's happening right the way through the process until the 11th hour, which is always a huge challenge. Okay, I think I would want to move on and look at the role of customer learning when it comes to onboarding, because that's a huge topic. Hopefully, we'll understand a little bit more around why continuous customer education is so crucial to long-term success, because it is, and we'll likely all know that educated customers are a lot more likely to stay engaged with your product or your service because they're educated, and that's just logical. So, and some companies have managed to do this really, really well. If we think about HubSpot or Slack or LearnUpon or Planhat, we've all managed to integrate learning into our onboarding strategies really quite well. But what I'd love to ask Peter, I'm going to come to you first. Why is customer learning, in your opinion, such a really critical part of the onboarding process?
Sure. Well, I think if the customer has the available resources, it takes the pressure off the person who's owning the onboarding, right? To educate that customer. They can then spend that time focusing on more strategic guidance rather than the day-to-day minutia of getting things set up, kind of getting bogged down in the weeds and in the the training, right? Also, since if the customer is actively engaged in the process, they're going through the learning, they're more invested in getting up to speed and seeing that value faster.
Sure, absolutely. There's so much to think about, isn't there? There really is so much to think about, but it's important, I really think, to be able to to integrate that role of customer learning in your onboarding process. What about you, Katya? What experience have you had when it comes to this? Why do you feel it's so important to have customer learning as such a critical part of this process?
Yeah, I think it actually speaks. Kerry put a great comment in there of like a lack of a champion on the customer side. And I think that the learning and onboarding, it really directly influences multiple kind of drivers in that. It's the product adoption, it's their customer satisfaction that then leads to their retention as well as delivering on their business outcomes. And having that champion on your customer side, you can only create that champion if you educate them correctly. It's going to help you reduce kind of friction and their confusion. So it's going to minimize the frustration that they have. And then again, hopefully that in turn leads to preventing a churn. So if you minimize that friction that they're experiencing, the product's easier to adopt. They should kind of pick it up better and utilize it more. It'll also then create kind of alignment between their goals and their business objectives, which is one of the key things with learning programs that's not always done, is looking at what is our learning delivering internally? What are the objectives that we can facilitate for the company through delivering more effective training of our customers? And then the one that I think is pivotal for a team to focus on is that training as well, it's a fraction, like it's not just product utilization. It's also around making sure that, or sorry, it's not just the feature adoption is what I meant to say. So it's not just about kind of picking up a given feature. It's making sure that your customers know how and when to use it so that they can get a greater value that they derive from your product.
Yeah, I think another thing for me that pops into mind as well is, the better informed your customers are, I think it really does it results in a reduction in your support tickets. You'll see a lot less strain on your support team. It just benefits all around. So there's so many reasons why we should really focus on the role of customer learning when it comes to onboarding. And as I said, educated customer is a customer that's a lot more loyal to your product, to your service. So certainly something to think about there. I think let's move into the sort of world of data because, as our header or a topic of today's webinar might suggest, we are going to focus on and leverage data here when it comes to onboarding. So when we're talking about data-driven insights and how they can improve onboarding experiences, we all know that data allows companies to do lots of weird and wonderful things. I mean, we think of things such as segmenting customers based on their industry, on their role, on their experience, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many things that we can use data to inform. How has the role of data, do you think, how has it evolved in creating effective onboarding strategies? Because we're all using data now, for better or for worse. And we've got AI now, we've got some really cool tools out there. So how has the role of data evolved here when it comes to onboarding strategies? Katya, maybe I'll come to you.
Yeah, sure. So on that one, I think the main role is the behavioral insights that we can glean from it that allow for proactive outreach. Mani mentioned earlier in the comment, making sure that the onboarding team understands the demands that are on a client's time, and the data that you can get from your onboarding program are also early flags to you of when something's not maybe going according to plan. Is this something that's an at-risk indicator? Is it time to reach out to your client and find out a little bit more about like what's going on in their world, what else they're managing alongside, onboarding your program? And that allows us to allow that nice personal element to come into programs that should be being built at scale, but also have a personalized touch and outreach alongside them. And so I think those behavioral insights are really key to how our implementation consultant, customer success manager, onboarding specialist can accurately intervene as and where is needed to make sure that things are moving along according to plan. The iterative improvements that you can make off of that data. So again, allowing you to identify those friction points, be that your content, be that your onboarding program as a whole, will allow you to kind of improve that adoption rate, make sure that you are picking, there was another comment, apologies, I didn't catch the name, but on picking the right modality for your users, with LearnUpon University, we initially built our content as we saw fit, and we used quite a mix of different content types. But it was actually through our survey that we have within the platform that gave us the data insight of customers wanted more like short, concise videos, that then led to us creating our library of quick videos that we now have with LearnUpon that's just geared and focused to like specific elements that users need access to. And then I'll just end off on kind of, because we've got a separation of teams. So we've kind of got an implementation team all the way through to the platform being up and live. And then we've got a customer success team that take care of our customers long term. And it's also really helpful information for the CSMs to have, allowing them to identify users that might have struggled during onboarding, so that they can also intervene and come alongside them, maybe in the post-launch life cycle, to see how they can help and mitigate any struggles that the customer's having.
Yeah, no, it's so important, those early warning signs of disengagement, using that data to jump in early, and being able to base your strategies on real-time insights is really important. Just before I come to you, Peter, on that one, Carly, you've asked a good question. We don't actually have slides per se. It's more of a conversation with the panel, which is why I'm saying please make the most of the fact that you can pop your question into the chat, and I will definitely try and get to as many as possible. So we don't have slides, but we do have a really cool ebook to share with you at the end of it that you can use a QR code to download. But getting back to the question, Peter, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you've leveraged data to be more effective with your onboarding?
Absolutely. I think Katya absolutely nailed it, right? It's we have all this information now, so we have so much visibility into what's going on with this onboarding. Just to use as an example here at Planhat, we use our tool internally for the onboarding process to collect that information in the kind of sales to CS handover. So we understand their goals, the KPIs, the people that are involved, try to map out what that initial value will be, so we can hit that as soon as possible, kind of tying back to Chris and what you were saying, like the lack of urgency, short-term value, right? So have insight to that. Then we have the understanding of who the actors are during the onboarding process, so that we can automate specific tasks and content, whatever it might be, to be sent to the right person at the right time. And then as the owner of the onboarding process, you have insight into those roadblocks, into the progress of the onboarding, to understand where the people might where they are in the process, issues they might raise, and be able to intervene whenever something might pops up. So yeah, having that kind of full circle view of the onboarding, thanks to all this data, has proven to be so valuable.
Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway, isn't it? Really just being able to identify some early warning signs and using your data to be able to intervene then, sooner rather than later, when it comes to that. So that's super brilliant. Wanted to talk a little bit about metrics now, if I can. I know some people balk at metrics, and they're like, oh, I really don't like, measuring things, and I don't like numbers and number crunching. But it's really important. We know that already. We know that metrics matter, especially when assessing onboarding effectiveness. Maybe drop a Y or an N, a yes or a no, into the chat if you've ever struggled with knowing what types of data you should prioritize when you're evaluating your onboarding process, because I know that I certainly have. Some of the things that we might want to track are onboarding completion rates, maybe feature adoption rates during onboarding, maybe activation rates. They're the types of things that we typically look at. But Katya, I'm going to come to you first. As a manager of the implementation team in LearnUpon, what types of data should organizations prioritize when they're evaluating their onboarding process?
Yeah, I think with this one, a good starting point is to think of data that's going to paint you a picture on a comprehensive view of your team's performance, the customer experience, and also help you identify areas for improvement. So, Jen, you listed some great ones there on, kind of the feature adoption being key. Other ones that you might consider are drop-off points within your onboarding. Customer CSAT is definitely one of my favorites, and you can have just your general customer CSAT. But for example, in LearnUpon University, we have a specific CSAT that's tied to our content creation and engagement. So that then allows us to specifically target improvements just to our content delivery. Open-ended survey questions are always great, but I would also advise everyone to think about what are you going to do with that question. So a lot of times if you Google, for example, generic feedback survey questions, open-ended questions, you'll get things like, did we provide you with enough content? And if a client says no to that, what are you going to do with it? Though you still don't have the next phase of, well, if we didn't provide you enough content, what is the additional content that we need to give you? What was actually missing from that program? So be careful with how you think about those open-ended questions and craft them in such a way to give your team actionable insights off the back of them. Then looking at things like your key setup task cadence. So what are the key points of configuration that your customers need to be doing, and making sure that those are in place and actionable, be that through, your project planning tool, being able to see how and when those happen, are great insights. I know we've actually recently integrated with Planhat and making use of their workflows where we can see when customers mark off certain tasks within their implementation, which has been really helpful. And then also comparing your different customer groups and how they're performing during onboarding. There was a comment earlier about kind of having very generic onboarding programs that are you kind of painting with a really broad brush, and being able to compare what customers are going through within their onboarding experience is, you might have a broad brush implementation, and that's absolutely okay because we're all at different life cycles when it comes to this. But having the data points where you can then compare and contrast against different customer segments or different kind of products, packages that they've purchased will then help you start layering on some customization from there.
Yeah, that's really great, Katya. I love all of those, and probably stole a few of them on you with the onboarding completion rates. They were the real kind of upfront typical ones that popped into my mind. And yes, we use Planhat in LearnUpon as well. So a great example there to bring that one in. And I'm sure Planhat has assessed their onboarding of LearnUpon as well, which is probably a little bit ironic because we're pretty new to the product and it's going really well. Peter, what about yourself? When you think about metrics that matter when you're onboarding customers, what sort of metrics might you be considering? Anything that Katya maybe has not mentioned?
I think Katya covered pretty much everything there. That was a fantastic answer. Yeah, when I think about it, it's right. You mentioned using that broad brush for generic onboardings, but it's the question, right? Should every customer receive the same onboarding? Should it be tailored? Is that based off of segment? Is it based off of the product they purchased, their license details? And then based off of that, right? Like what's the time to first value? Like how soon can we prove that? How can we actually measure that? What does the product usage look like? Katya, you mentioned that as well, some customer feedback. And then, the efficiency metrics around the duration of onboarding. What's the average time? Then tie that back into segment, tie that back into product, right? Is it longer for certain customers, shorter for this product? What's the time spent in each stage? Are there any roadblocks? Are there any falling off points? So yeah, every kind of summarizing everything Katya said, but yeah, that's what I would say. Those data points.
That's good. I like Riaz has a great question in there for whomever might want to jump on that one. So what tools do you use to gather deeper data, like search terms used with both successful and unsuccessful results, learner workflow within the portal, etc.? So what sort of tools might you use to gather that data? Probably quite specific to different roles, but maybe Katya?
Yeah, so Riaz, I can speak to that one. It's short and sweet, unfortunately. So actually, we don't. So within LearnUpon University, what we did is we worked closely with our knowledge center team, and we targeted their frequently used terms that they get via our Zendesk. Not our Zen, is it Jen?
Yeah, yeah, send
Yeah,
us.
yeah, right. Sorry, I had a momentary lapse there. Um, via the Zendesk tool as to what customers were frequently searching for. And then that was what we used to correlate and tag all of our content within LearnUpon University for. So we were specifically tagging content based off of what customers were searching for in our knowledge-based tool. So be that for help articles and all the rest. And then what we did via that was then monitor how our support tickets were reduced based off of those themes and terms, and then the content completion rate of each of those courses in kind.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's
a
something specifically that measures what's being searched for, but we did kind of build a strategy off of what we had access to.
Yeah, it's a good question. You can probably go as granular as you like. Peter, have you anything that you guys are using over in Planhat to try and drill down into that data to be better informed?
We did something similar with our help centers built on Intercom, so we looked at all those recent searches as well, and that has informed a lot of what we build out here on the enablement side. So adding to our content library, adding to those learning paths, but then Planhat itself, you can track all of the minute details of each workflow, each step, each task that you have within the onboarding process to understand which ones have been delayed, which ones are skipped, and then high level the overall progress of these workflows of the onboarding process. So yeah, we use our own tool. We drink our own Kool-Aid, if you will.
I love that one. Okay, so we've looked at the role of data, and we've also looked at what types of data we should be thinking of. What about merging data? So we've got our learning strategy. How might we think about integrating data insights with customer education initiatives or with our learning strategies? How can organizations, what I'm trying to ask is, how can organizations blend their data with their learning strategy? Katya, I might come to you on that one first.
Sure. So my first piece that I'd advise everyone is integrate your learning tools with your analytics platforms. One, to save your admins some time and pulling out their hair, but two, to really centralize everything and give you the ability to paint a picture with your onboarding plan alongside other customer data insights that you have, because just how they're engaging with your learning might not always correlate to how they're adopting your product or your service. And so you want to put those into a place where you can start to draw those correlations and centralize it to make more informed decisions. Then we kind of touched on this a little bit, so I won't spend too much time, but then identifying the learning gaps. So, we spoke about how we leverage search terms within our knowledge base to identify what were common gaps that we were missing or things that customers were looking for that they could use some more assistance with. So again, identifying those learning gaps through how they engage with your support tickets, through the user behavior on your platforms, to identify those common friction points and start to work to mitigate those. And then the last one, it actually kind of touches on one question that Kristen sent through, which was, what is your advice for the perception that every client needs an individualized onboarding program? It seems like every scaling organization, you start to pull out the cookie cutter clients to create your onboarding process, but then realize they're all slightly different, maybe based on products purchased or features promised. And that was going to be my other one, was then the personalization of the learning journeys based on customer segmentation. Now I can speak to how we've done this at LearnUpon, because similar to what Kristen said, we looked at what was our baseline, what was our cookie cutter flows, so to speak. And really where we've taken an individualized or kind of more personalized element isn't the personalization in handing you a perfect personalized plan, but it's giving you the baseline foundation and then allowing you to go and select whatever additional that you want under the guidance and tutelage of your implementation consultant that you work with at LearnUpon to kind of create that plan. So using that data to then drive off what are the elements that the team can pick and choose and go to a client and say, here is a selection of additional elements that you want to go and have a look at, or additional training that would be helpful to you. And then also allowing customers, at will to go and pick and select what they'd like. That personalization, I think in every organization can take various shapes and forms. And yes, you'll have some where there's a dedicated product track or there's a dedicated service track, but also then allowing some flex in your program for ad hoc personalization to happen as well. And then my favorite one is the content effectiveness. So as I say, we've got our own survey that is coupled together with our content in LearnUpon. And I think it's so important to have that level of detail with your content training to give you feedback specifically on your educational materials and if you're hitting the mark on that or not, and then being able to adapt and pivot and allow for that continuous improvement. So paying special attention to your feedback loops that you have in implementation. I think there are various spaces within an implementation or onboarding that you can create those feedback loops. So be mindful to kind of keep those open and integrate those into the various places that they present themselves.
Yeah, no, I love that. And Kristen, that's a great question as well. Katya, I'm glad you were able to incorporate an answer into that question as well. I'm conscious of time, but I want to get to this last question because it really puts a nice finish, I think, on our discussion. And it's related to success. So we know that success varies from organization to organization. Of course, that goes without saying, but something that we might all be asking ourselves, I'm going to come to you on this one first, Peter, is no matter what industry we're in, how can we measure onboarding effectiveness and how can we ensure continuous improvement? So how do you define success when scaling an onboarding program, Peter?
Sure. It kind of comes down to my first answer, which is, it's balancing the automation with the personalization and efficiency, which will kind of ultimately ensure that the customers, they're reaching that value as soon as possible. That's what it all comes down to, seeing the value as soon as possible. So looking at some of the metrics, right? Looking at the onboarding completion rate, that product adoption, the engagement, any of that customer satisfaction, that feedback. Right. It's the ability to onboard more customers without increasing that manual effort to automate those repetitive tasks, providing those self-service resources from, integrations with LearnUpon, things like that. So yeah, it's all about how to get to that time to value, as how to shorten that as soon as possible, while still kind of automating and personalizing the journey.
Sure. Yeah, it's such a broad topic. Katya, please give us your thoughts on that one. And sorry, I've just shared screen, so please feel free to scan that QR code so that you can avail of that ebook that I've popped up there. Hopefully you can all see the right screen. But Katya, please go ahead, share your thoughts on the success question.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think it's a combination of delivering on the customer's goals, but also working to provide them strategic guidance to make sure those goals are delivering their company objectives and that they're thinking of the broader picture of what that learning is meant to achieve for their organization. In turn, this should hopefully help drive their retention and allow us to create operational efficiencies for them, but as well as my team, because we also need to be bigger, badder, and better at what we do, and just all around enhancing the user experience. Again, I look at that both for our clients, but also for us internally as a team here as well.
Yeah, no, sure. I love that. Thank you so much, everybody. I know that we're very, very close to time, but I did want to open up to any final questions that anybody might have for our panel. We're okay to stay on for a couple more minutes. I know people's days are extremely busy, but please do, anybody who has been shy or would like to ask a final question, please do pop them into the chat. I'm trying to just scroll back and see if there were any answers to the icebreaker question. There were a lot of things that came through per communication. We got to that too much too soon. Yeah. Making sure that our onboarding team considers the demands of the client's day-to-day work for sure. Yeah. No, some great discussions there. As I say, you have our names. Please do reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can bug us there with more questions if you wish. Sorry, Katya and Peter.
welcome.
Please do.
Yeah, for sure. We'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you so much to everybody for joining. Oh, Brandon has a final question there. Has anyone found a successful way to automate onboarding on LearnUpon post payment on Stripe?
Yeah, Brandon, maybe just one clarifying question on myself is I'm assuming that this isn't using LearnUpon storefront, but your own e-commerce site. Okay, so that one, Brandon, we do have customers that have successfully done this leveraging LearnUpon's API. So you can have Stripe send a command through to LearnUpon to create a user after they have purchased via Stripe. And that you can either create and enroll is the two APIs that you're looking for on that one. But Brandon, if you want to chat through this one, I am happy to chat to you more. I'll find you on our Planhat and I'll email you tomorrow.
Brilliant. You're in implementation now, Brandon. So yeah, absolutely. We can reach out to you. Thanks for that. A great question as well. Thank you both so much for joining us today for the webinar. We really appreciate your time. And again, if anybody has any additional questions, please reach out to us either on LinkedIn or you've got Emma's email. I think Emma might have popped her email in at the very top there. Emma from our product marketing team would be happy to take any of your questions as well. So until the next time, everybody, thank you again so much for joining, and we hope you enjoyed today's session. And we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.